Greetings all, D&Disability here. I am here with another subject interview for my disability and role-playing games interview column. I'm interviewing Jay today. So, without any further ado, let's dive into it. First things first, can you introduce yourself and tell me what makes you consider yourself part of the disabled stroke RPG communities? Where do you fit into the disabled stroke RPG community?
Um, Honestly, I don't consider myself part of any community really. I just I have some disabilities and I play RPGs.
Nice, nice. And what are they, if I may ask, or what are the most prominent ones then?
The disabilities, it's primarily autism and ADHD, anxiety, agoraphobia. Over the past couple years, I've been having physical issues as well. To we're not even sure what it is exactly because it's a lot of symptoms, but it's been really aggravating the mental aspect as well. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely. What RPGs do you engage in?
Primarily Dungeons and Dragons. I prefer first edition AD&D. After that, BX. Other than that, pro probably Call of Cthulhu and World of Darkness.
Nice. I have played all of those except World of Darkness. I might have to try it sometime. So,
Unfortunately, a lot of
oh,
people don't like playing Mortals games, but
hmm, who knows? Maybe. And can I get your pronouns, please?
yeah, referred to it by he.
That's fine. Okay, he, him.
Yes.
Okay, just covering my bases. I typically like to ask. How'd you get into the role-playing group you are stroke were in?
Currently, I don't have a static group. The first group I had, I went to a friend's house when I was probably 10 years old, and he had a friend over that had the Dungeons and Dragons 3 third edition player's handbook. I picked up I rolled up a dwarf, got killed by a skeleton in one hit, and I just got hooked. And groups from then that were static were generally either people I was going to school with, people I was acquainted with one way or another, and then also pickup games at the local game store. One of a couple local game stores. There has also been games through websites. I don't even remember what the website names were, but signing up to like play at a game store.
That's amazing. You already started diving into my next question. And actually, here's part of it. You mentioned starting when you were 10 and playing third edition, much like me. Though I technically started when I was like 6, but that was because my dad tried to teach a 6-year-old first edition and then got mad when I didn't understand, as you do. What was your first experience with RPGs like? You mentioned getting killed by a skeleton, which is very, very, very much low level third edition. But what was that like? What got you hooked?
I don't think I actually really thought about it that way. I don't know. I just I just liked I liked making characters. I liked thinking of different character ideas. I also was into video games like I hadn't played the original Baldur's Gate yet, but I played the hack and slash Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, and I also always liked sword and sorcery and even like heroic fantasy movies, from like Clash of the Titans to Lord of the Rings and anything in between.
Those are very underrated games. I still play them quite regularly, actually. The first one is a go-to. I want to sit and beat something in like 6 hours kind of game. It's also great in co-op. It really shines in co-op. Why do you keep playing RPGs? You mentioned why you started, right? And what got you kind of hooked and the media you were consuming, but what keeps you going?
I just really enjoy it, to be honest.
Hmm.
It's just something that's fun for me, and I probably think about it more than I should. It doesn't get in the way of any responsibilities, but a lot of a lot of free time is just taken up by thinking about what can I do in a game, or can I, as a DM or a player,
No, I
rather
completely,
than doing something maybe more productive when I have free time.
I no, I completely understand. And hey, free time is free time. We don't have to be productive all the time.
True.
What feelings do you get from playing D&D? Does the game ever cause feelings of pleasure or frustration for you as a disabled person?
There's two parts to that. It
Hmm.
causes feelings of pleasure and frustration, just as a person in general, just playing the game
Hmm.
as anyone would experience. But I think being autistic specifically, and as a player, depending on who the DM is, I might not be understanding something the way they're conveying it, and I have to keep breaking character to try to ask for clarification. Even if even if the DM is completely fine with that, it it's not fun for me. As a DM, there can be times where I'm really into something, and some of the players might not be, and I'm not aware because I'm not picking up on any cues, and people don't want to be confrontational, and I won't know until at least after the game is done that someone just wasn't into the game because I wasn't picking up on cues.
No, completely. I completely understand. That's why I think in a video that I have coming out next week, well, actually, technically speaking, like yeah, next week, I kind of talk about how I address that a little bit, but yeah, it can even when it's not say a problem for the DM or even when it's not a problem at the table, it can definitely be challenging and be frustrating for sure. So then, what do you consider failure as a player at the table, and then what do you consider failure from a disability perspective?
Failure as a player.
How would you define
Um,
failure?
it's a cooperative game, so playing in a way that is antithetical to what the party's goals are, it would be the primary failure, I guess. Other than that, it's obviously if your character dies or something. I mean that's not fun, but the point of the game is for everyone to have fun. If that's accomplished, then I don't really consider it a failure. Now, as a disabled person,
Mm-hmm.
it's mostly when I keep having, well, if I have repeated issues in one session where I'm feeling disconnected from other people because I am either not understanding something the same way as they are, or just not processing, just having it explained again and again, and I'm just not processing it. It can be demoralizing.
Well, and sometimes DMs think to if they just re-explain or restate what's there in the same way, that it'll sink in. And I often find that that's not the case. You have to try and explain it sometimes two or three different ways that that work. It's why everybody picks on me because my analogies never really make sense to them, and that's because they make sense to me. And so I get where that's coming from.
Yeah, that's understandable. Also from the DM perspective, if I try to explain something and someone doesn't understand, I can't always try to think of a a perspective in which I can convey what I'm trying to say that's understandable easily.
Do you keep playing despite your failures or to work through them?
I I'm not sure, to be honest. I guess I would say despite, because it's not it's not anywhere near bad enough that it the negatives outweigh the positives in most cases. I if I don't enjoy a session, well, I'm still probably going to enjoy the next 3, 4 sessions. If I have issue in part of one session, that doesn't mean I'm not going to enjoy the whole session.
That's an excellent attitude to have, by the way. I've seen single moments of failure completely derail an entire session of play. So good for you. That is an excellent attitude to have. Bravo, sir. You're as previously as effectively to my understanding, we defined failure as people not having fun at the gaming table, and then at a personal disabled player level, being frustrated with your disability or being frustrated with your level of understanding or having to repeatedly struggle to achieve understanding and effectively engage with the game. At least that's my understanding of what you've said previously. Feel free, correct me if I'm wrong. So then, have you, as a player or one of your characters, ever used one of those moments and played through that moment of personal or table failure to work through it?
For me as a person, definitely. It with games with people I'm not well acquainted with, especially as a player, there can be DMs that aren't too great. Honestly, honestly, some are really bad, and I just I won't like get up and leave during the session, but I very likely may not be coming back to that table if it's really that bad. As a character, I I guess the I try to I try to be immersed in the character while playing and not try to think too much out of character. So if there's a chance of failure as a character, then I try to think what would be possible from that character's perspective to avoid failure. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Okay, okay, good answer, good answer. I never said these questions would be easy, but could you tell me a
Nope,
story
I'm
of
fine with that.
Can you tell me of a story of a time you or your character failed at the table? We always tend to
Uh,
remember those moments, right? Those screw ups, whether because they're funny or I guess sometimes sad, but typically funny or random or they mean something to us. That's why I ask. It's not arbitrary.
okay. One of the earliest examples I can think of is when I first started going to games at like game stores, probably 14 or 15. In one game, the DM had his probably 10-year-old son in the game. He was playing a barbarian, and after a couple sessions, immediately, not immediately, but in the same session, he looted a magic greatsword, and then the DM threw a dragon at the party, uh, like a juvenile dragon. Party's like 5th level. The dragon tries to fly away. His son tries to throw his sword at the dragon to kill it while it's flying away. And then the DM proceeds to kind of berate his son for doing so, and basically says if he rolls bad, then he's losing his sword. And it was that was probably the most uncomfortable moment I had at a gaming table. Everyone else in the group, everyone else in the group agreed afterwards. Like we didn't want to sit there around a man making his 10-year-old son cry over overthrowing a weapon at a fleeing dragon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Now, as a character, yeah, lots of times. Mm, I my first like long-term character was a dwarven rogue in 3.5,
Mm-hmm.
and I I failed finding or disabling traps a lot. I failed at being stealthy a lot. I failed at pretty much everything that a rogue is supposed to do, except combat. That was it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just as much success I've had, I've probably had failure.
Okay. 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 Did that moment intersect with your disability? Was it because of like physical or mental limitation, do you think?
There probably were times where I failed in character because I was hyper focused on one aspect and not thinking of a different aspect. Like I may have been hyper focused on sneaking through a dark corridor to like ambush an enemy, and forget to also be searching for traps at that time and set off a trap.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so, so the hyper focus on one aspect while not giving attention to another aspect has probably been indirectly responsible for some failure in character at least. Now, out of character as a player, it's as I said, it's just when I have trouble communicating properly with people, it can sometimes be demoralizing, depending on how bad it is.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about your experiences as a disabled player or player in general within the disabled stroke RPG communities? You mentioned before that you don't see yourself as a part of either, right? But often we operate kind of within them, even if we aren't necessarily a part of them. So, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yes, when I think about it,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
a lot a, a lot of people. Well, I don't know about now, but when I was regularly playing wi- with in person with people I don't know, up until about maybe 2015, 2016, before fifth edition really blew up, people are generally like completely random people are generally very accommodating. In my experience, like there's a lot there's been a lot of stereotypes about tabletop gamers over the decades, and I don't find most of them to be accurate. One of them being that they're very gatekeepy, and I haven't really seen that to be the case with all the all the people that I didn't know. that I've played games with. I even got into the war game War Machine for a few years because, well, I went to game and the DM had to call out. A couple players started playing War Machine, and I'm 15, 16 years old at this time, and another member in that group like shows me how the game is played and lets me handle hundreds of dollars worth of miniatures, someone that he barely knows, to check out the game. And it's a completely different story, like reading online message boards or Reddit or something like that.
Well,
But just what I've experienced in person, people are generally very, very receptive, it seems.
the internet loves to perpetuate both ends of the spectrum, right? Both perfection and horror stories, right? Horror stories are often what sell and make YouTube and like get all the big views, right? Failure stories, whatever. And yeah, I absolutely agree. Many and even the edition warriors, those who decry third, 3, 5, or fourth edition, um, or those who decry, any edition but those, or those who only want, to play fifth, or are all mad at us because we're not out there playing gumshoe. Even those guys aren't quite as bad as I think they are online. The internet is an infinite echo chamber that sometimes magnifies the worst side of the human experience.
With you saying that, that actually made me think of something that I do have an issue with in tabletop RPGs about.
Go ahead.
Um, this this is this is a big part of why I prefer like AD&D first edition or basic expert over 3.x 5e, even second edition. with with 3.x and 5e, there is a huge emphasis on building a character, having what your character's path is going to be predetermined before you even sit down to play. Whereas with first edition and basic and expert and OD&D or one of its clones, you just roll dice, you pick your race and class, and you just go along your way. With the build culture of 3.x, 5e, um, even second edition with the massive amount of kit books,
Hmm.
I will end up spending a lot of time theory crafting and creating characters that I'll never even play. If I do play, we'll never get to a point where it's it actually gets to the build idea I had.
Yeah.
So
When you're looking at a build and it goes, well, this doesn't come online till seventh level, and the campaign's only, one levels 1 through 3. It can be brutal.
I don't know if that's specifically related to autism or ADHD, but I I do end up becoming very, very like hyper focused on anything like build related when it's part of the system, and it feels like a waste of time. So I prefer something that doesn't even allow that as an option.
No, I have players still that miss third edition. They really do, and or well, 3, 5 really is what they miss. And every so often they ask if I'm gonna go back to it and run it again. And I just kind of smile and shake my head no and move on because that build schema right? It's not just the same for players, it's also the same for DMs. I've spent tens of hours crafting NPC parties for the party to fight, as an example, only for them to be dead in 2 turns. Because PCs aren't really meant to face PCs, you know, and stuff like that. And no, it's far from just you. I used to set a friend of mine a task in high school of building the most broken characters imaginable in 3.5 because the monster manual gave you, this monster has race statistics, so why not? And yeah, he'd spend hours making something god awfully broken. A Hazov Torek, I think, was one of his worst creations. But no, I completely understand. Anything else?
I can't really think of anything right now.
No worries. If you ever do think of anything, you're always welcome back for another discussion. Happy to chat with you anytime. So, with that, if y'all like this kind of content, would like to see more, please remember to like, share, subscribe, ring the notification bell so you don't miss when I have an upload, and hopefully you'll see more interviews like this one in the future. Take it easy, guys.